Meanwhile, President Biden may be pushing for funding the police, but some members of his party are making that message a tough one.
Defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police.
Yes, I support the defund movement.
Talking about the reduction of our NYPD budget and defunding a $6 billion NYPD budget.
Not only do we need to defund, but we need to dismantle.
Defund the police does not mean abolish the police.
Many cities in America, over 1/3 of their city budget goes to police. So we have to have this conversation. What are we doing?
Jason Rantz now, Seattle radio talk show host, joining us. Those words will live forever, Jason.
Absolutely. And you know what? Kudos, I guess, to Joe Biden for saying the right thing very, very, very late, but he's talking to the wrong audience. You have to talk to the Democrat lawmakers in New York, Washington, Oregon, Illinois, California, and of course, PA, where he was. Talk to Larry Krasner, the DA, or the mayor, Jim Kenney, because he said he doesn't support defunding. And yet he then cuts the budget in a city at a time where you've got a surge of crime. And this whole idea of and they tried this before where they said that it was the Biden administration actually funded the police and it was the Republicans who were against it. It's just transparent gaslighting. It was the Democrats who defunded police. It was the Democrats who pushed for no cash bail. It's the Democrats who pushed for restorative justice programs, which means criminals aren't actually going to jail. Instead, they're going to therapy. It was the Democrats who raised funds for all of these criminals indiscriminately to bail them out. And they're still using COVID to this day in certain areas, including here in Washington, that say we're not going to book criminals because COVID could spread. And so we're just releasing criminals out into the wild. And guess what? They are becoming prolific offenders that are just taking over cities and counties and states. And that's a Democrat issue. So, you know what? Kudos, Joe Biden. You care about cops all of a sudden. Tell that to your own party.
Fair enough. Jason, Biden has a lot of talk on violent crime, at least recently. And now we're learning that a man pictured here, freed by bail, by a bail fund backed by VP Kamala Harris, was recently charged with murder. This is Sean Michael Tillman. Police arrested him back in 2020 during the riot in the wake of George Floyd's killing. At the time, Kamala Harris tweeted, "If you're able to chip in now to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota." Don't we all remember that moment? And now that man who was initially freed has been recently charged with murder, Jason.
Absolutely. And I can't say that anyone should be shocked at this point because we've seen this strategy over and over again. It maybe started in a big way during the George Floyd riots and protests. But to this day, we see these groups indiscriminately giving money to anyone who happens to check some boxes. So they look at someone who's a criminal and they say, okay, it happens to be a homeless person, so let's just release them. They're not actually looking at the crime. They're not looking at the background. They're not looking at the history. They're just saying this person's homeless or this person happens to be a person of color, so we're just going to release them. And what they end up doing is releasing really bad people who deserve to be in jail because they continuously victimize the communities that they live in. And it's patently unfair to the people who just want to go about their lives, have a family, be safe, go to work without getting attacked. And unfortunately, we keep seeing the same script over and over and over again.
Wow. Jason, this is Ted Williams, former D.C. homicide detective, on America's feelings about law enforcement today. Listen.
The law-abiding citizens in this country have no confidence, unfortunately, in law enforcement. And I think it's all because of the political mainstream that's out here right now. We've got to stop in this country and back up. And we've got to assist law enforcement.
All of this, Jason, as a new poll shows more than 1 in 5 Americans are afraid of being attacked in their own neighborhood. And those numbers go up significantly for people of color, Jason.
Absolutely, because people of color and neighborhoods of color, they realize that when you defund the police, they're the ones who are disproportionately the victims of crime, oftentimes violent crime. And we like to pretend that's not the case. The left certainly does. The left tells you that the biggest threat to the black community are evil, racist cops who go around just murdering people. And we know that's absolutely untrue. We know that police play an incredibly important role in all communities, but they're not able to proactively police. They're not not able to engage in community policing, which effectively means, hey, you're getting the same cops pretty much going into neighborhoods, getting to know everybody, the business owners, the residents, and being a trusted part of the community. But when you constantly demonize them, when you push all of this anti-police rhetoric, well, they don't become trusted. On top of that, when you defund police, you cause a staff exodus, which is what has been happening at police departments all across the country. They are low on cops. And part of the problem, frankly, is you can't recruit at the same time because you're demonizing this entire industry.
Yeah, Jason, meanwhile, Stacey Abrams is taking a second swing at Georgia's governorship. She is distancing herself from the defund push, just like the president is. But new Fox reporting shows her close ties to ultra-liberal megadonor George Soros. According to those findings, a Soros group paid a company owned by Abrams to consult on Soros's early efforts to elect soft-on-crime DAs. Soros also donated $1 million to Abrams' PAC this spring, and Abrams herself sits on the board of at least two groups that back defunding the police and abolishing prisons. Pretty hard to distance yourself from the defund the police movement when you look at these board seats, Jason.
Yeah, she has a resume that indicates where she stands on policing in prison. She's with Black Voices for Black Justice Fund. She's with the Marguerite Casey Foundation, which is based out here in Seattle. These are organizations who either as an organization take these stances or have a whole bunch of members who take that stance. And for her to say that all of a sudden she's pro-police or at least not anti-police is, of course, absurd. But she's looking at the polls like so many other Democrats are, including the Biden administration, and they're seeing that crime is such a significant issue. And when crime is an issue, we all look back and say, who was branded as the defunders? Who was branded as the pro-criminal anti-police crowd? And it's very clearly Democrats. So sorry, you can't all of a sudden erase the last several years of your own activism. The Democrats are very good at branding, and they own this, and they should own this. The only problem with stories like this is, unfortunately, when we're talking about funding, I think most people don't connect the dots. It's very difficult to find out even where the money is all connected. And so it's on all of us, especially the folks who are watching right now and are aware of this story. Get it out there. Make sure you're telling your friends and neighbors and your coworkers. Fox News Digital did a really good job on this investigation. So let's get this actually out there so people know who's responsible for everything that currently they're complaining about.
If you don't feel safe walking down the street in your own neighborhood, that can drive a lot of people to the polls. Jason Rantz on all of that for us. Jason, thank you. So
Thanks.
just